Second question, I fully agree, of course, that a global basic income helps stabilize the population throughout the world. The more global we can go, for example, if we can get a European basic income, it will stabilize the European population. I fully agree with that. Indeed, when we went to see President Cardoso with Eduardo a number of years ago, part of the argument for the federal intervention in the income supports that were initiated by municipalities in Campinas, in Brasilia, etc., part of the argument was the stabilization of the rural population so that they wouldn't all have to flood into the favelas. So I agree with that. But of course, the difficulty about migration is, first, if you do at a small level, the smaller the level, the more vulnerable you are to the emigration of the contributors and the immigration of beneficiaries. You don't have that problem at the global level. But the other problem about migration is the heterogeneity of the population. And of course, this heterogeneity is massive, is maximal at the global level. And the problem at the global level is that the rich Californians don't want to redistribute to the poor people in Recife or the people in Greece or whatever. And that's the other difficulty, the heterogeneity of the population. So the more you solve one of the problems by going global, the more you have the other problem, and conversely. Finally, and briefly on the question of of new consciousness, etc. So among basic income supporters, you have quite a few people who say, well, we need a new spirituality, etc. And I think at the same time there is something correct there and something that cannot be sufficient. What is correct there is that it's right to challenge the idea that all that matters is growth. And if people say, well, a basic income by redistributing will slow down growth, we simply have to ask, and so what? There are lots of things in life that are not reducible to the income, to our consumption power, and room must be made for that. And the people who insist on spirituality, meditation, whatever, say that. But at the same time, this is not a sufficient answer to the first question we were asked, getting something for nothing. Some people say, I attach importance, new consciousness, meditation, thinking differently about myself. But the other people who work say, yes, okay, but work for it then. It's not at my expense that you are going to indulge in the sort of living you have. So that insisting on that aspect of life is not sufficient to avoid the first question, which is, let's have a fair division. Some people like you attach importance to that, but it's not, the importance you attach to that cannot be sufficient to say and need to be subsidized in order to that by the hard works in society. So we need an argument of the first type to tackle that.
Thank you. Professor Standing, please.
Thank you. I will just respond to Ruben's question. I missed the first part, so if I miss a point, I apologize. I think the precariat is not something that has always been with it. It isn't a lumpen category. It's a new sense of chronic insecurity, which is a main aspect of a global society based on flexible labor markets and the forms of regulation that have been developed. And I think it's important to think of a redistributive strategy, a politics of paradise that I like to call it, which thinks what sort of policies and institutions would appeal to people who are in a precariat existence and are likely to continue to be in a precariat existence. And that means almost all of us. And I think it's important to see the global transformation, like all transformations, as a struggle for control over the key assets of the era. And the key assets of a tertiary society and a global open system are things like time, financial capital, knowledge, and quality space. These are not the sort of things that the industrial proletariat struggled for in an industrial society. And if we think along those lines, we will give greater respect to the idea of giving people a sense of ex-ante security rather than ex-post compensation security, which was the model of laborism and social democracy in the 20th century. We've moved beyond that. That wouldn't work. It wouldn't give the security and sense of social solidarity. Social solidarity is going to come from institutions and sense of universalism. And what we're seeing now is that cash transfers and a sense of giving people cash in which they can have security is gradually moving into the mainstream. And the next battle is going to be a battle over conditionality, selectivity, means testing, targeting. But once we moved on to that battle, I think we'll find it easier to win, because most of those arguments are stupid arguments in the end. But I feel that we must not treat basic income as a panacea, but as part of a strategy for reviving society and putting egalitarianism back at the center of the debate. And that's how I would put it, and I try and argue in the book.
Obrigado, professor Standing. Para finalizar essa mesa, passo a palavra para o senador Suplicy, que prometeu que só vai falar 1 minuto e meio.
Eu queria transmitir que também está presente entre nós, neste congresso da BIEN, dos maiores precursores e que propôs, em 1956, num pronunciamento em 23 de março, quando o deputado federal, ao tempo do presidente Juscelino Kubitschek, Josué de Castro, autor de Geopolítica, Geografia da Fome, disse, em 2 linhas, eu defendo a necessidade de darmos o mínimo a cada um, de acordo com o direito que têm todos os brasileiros de um mínimo para a sua sobrevivência. Ou seja, ele colocou com muita clareza. E queria ainda transmitir ao Gaistene e ao Philippe Van Parijs, que nos mostrou a foto da reunião de 1986 em Louvain, da BIEN, e agora o que nós estamos vendo, que eles, por este movimento e todos nós aqui presentes, damos razão ao grande poeta alemão Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, quando ele disse, quando uma criatura humana desperta para um grande sonho e sobre ele lança toda a força de sua alma, todo o universo conspira a seu favor.
Bem, realmente tivemos uma bela sessão, agradeço a todos, agradeço em particular a mesa. Os trabalhos retomam nas sessões da tarde, vão ser várias sessões paralelas, algo como 10, 13, e eu vou pedir, houve pequenas mudanças de número de salas, qualquer dificuldade, por favor, vocês se dirijam ao pessoal da organização. Muito obrigada.